Last year, Kodai Senga and Manaea were being counted on as the aces of the New York Mets. This year, there are a couple of wild cards.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. On the show today, going to be talking about Kodai Senga and Manaea and which one is the better bounce back candidate for 2026. In the first segment, we'll break down what went wrong last season. In the second segment, I want to talk about Manaea and how I believe mental mistakes were the real issue for him last year, but we'll also go through Justin Willard, the new pitching coach's comments on what Manaea is working on to be himself again this season. Then in the final segment, we'll address some of Willard's comments on Kodai Senga and what they're working on with him. And I'll give you my think projections, or I'll make some predictions for what these guys are going to do in the upcoming season. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the #1 daily podcast on the New York Mets. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. So let's start off with Kodai Senga. If you look at his stats last season, they're not that bad. 22 starts, a 3.02 ERA, and 113 and a third innings pitched. If you would have told me a year ago I could sign on a dotted line to guarantee those statistics for Senga, I would have taken them. If you give me that same offer right now, I would take them. But it's just how he got there that made his season so frustrating, because he was unbelievable before Pete Alonso threw that high ball to Senga that he had a leap to catch to make that out at first base, and it ended up being that hamstring injury that basically cost him the rest of the season, because he was never the same after that injury. Prior to going down, he was leading Major League Baseball in ERA, a 1.47 ERA across his first 13 starts. He went 7-3, and the Mets went 9-4 in those starts. Comes back, has a good first outing pitching in Kansas City, a great ballpark to pitch. And from that point on, he was awful. And if you look at why he was bad, there's one stat that tells the whole story. It's not the strikeout rate. It did drop 4%, but that's not why he was bad. The walk rate climbed 2%. Again, that's not the reason. The reason that Kodai Senga was bad when he came off the injury is the home run ball. Prior to going down, his home run per 9 rate was 0.49, which is elite. Across his first 13 starts, he gave up 4 home runs. He comes back, does not give up a home run against the Royals, but from the point of his return to the end of the season, his home run per 9 rate more than 4x'd to 1.82 from, again, 0.49 pre-injury. Across his final 8 starts, he gave up 8 home runs and gave up homers in 7 of the 8 outings. That right there tells the whole picture. If Kodai Senga can keep the ball in the yard, he has the ability to pitch himself out of jams, and it's very hard to stack 3-4 hits on Kodai Senga. But if he makes a mistake, you can make him pay, and that's what happened down the stretch. That's why he ends up in AAA at the end of the season. And why he was giving up those home runs, he was just in a constant fight to try to find his mechanics again. He is a fine-tooled sports car. When things are going well, there's few pitchers in Major League Baseball that are better. When a couple things end up off in those mechanics, he can look like an absolute disaster, as we saw down the stretch. So this season for Senga, we'll talk about it more, but it's really just a matter of getting healthy, getting those mechanics locked in, and keeping him in a groove as long as you can. But the Mets shopped him at certain points this winter. And I think at the end of the day, when you look at offers and nobody was probably offering anything of real value other than maybe salary relief for the Mets, it's tough to give up on the upside of Kodai Senga to just get off of the contract when the contract isn't that bad. He's owed $28 million over the next 2 seasons. If he had free agency, he would have gotten that, I think, very comfortably. So it's a flyer on the upside, but at least with Freddie Peralta, you aren't as dependent on Senga to lead their rotation, and you see what you get. Now, when it comes to Manaea, We remember what he did in 2024. He was unbelievable. 3.47 ERA across 181 and 2/3 innings pitched, and he got stronger throughout that season, especially once he adopted that Chris Sale arm slot. He gets the 3-year, $75 million deal, goes into spring training as the de facto ace last year, and he hurts his oblique. Comes back right before the All-Star break, was good. 4 outings in July. We forget. Sean Manaea gave up 4 runs across 17 1/3 innings pitched. He struck out 22 and walked just 4, had a 2.08 ERA. In August, he had 4 straight appearances where he gave up 4 or more runs. He had an ERA over 7 in August and an ERA of 6.98 in September. And the crazy thing is, you look at Sean Manaea's numbers last year. Strikeout rate, 28.5%, would have been the best mark of his career. Walk rate, 4.6%, again, would have been the best mark of his career. Sample size is small, just over 60 innings, but his stuff was still playing in the zone. His strikeout minus walk rate was 24% flat. And if you compare that to the qualified starters in Major League Baseball last year, only 3 guys had a better strikeout minus walk rate. And the names, it's arguably the 3 best pitchers in baseball last year: Tarek Skubal, Garrett Crochet, and Paul Skeens. And he didn't qualify, but if he did, Manaea would have been 4th on that list. So again, this stuff was still elite. What went wrong? Home run ball, very similar to Senga. Home run to fly ball rate was at 19.4% for Sean Manaea last year. That is 9% worse than his career average. So that stat is basically the amount of fly balls that you give up, how many leave the yard. About 20% of them left the yard for Manaea last season. Now, he did lose a little bit on his fastball, about 0.5 mile per hour, but I don't think that was the issue. Again, it was just the home run ball, just, not placing the fastball where he wanted it. He gave up 11 home runs in 2024 across 1,680 fastballs and sinkers. Now, he doesn't have a sinker. That's just how Savant categorized the pitch. That's how, or StatCast categorized the pitch that in 2024 for some reason. So I put those 2 numbers together and got to the 11 home runs in almost 1,700 fastballs in the 2024 season. Last year, with 663 fastballs, he gave up 7 home runs. So you see the difference in the home run rate just there on the heater. And then you look at the changeup, he got bludgeoned last year to the tune of a 4.12 batting average against, and he just completely got away from throwing the pitch. So then all of a sudden you're looking at Sean Manaea as a 2-pitch guy, fastball sweeper. He still needs that changeup. So when we look at what went wrong for Sean Manaea, those are the things that stand out. One more, 7 hit by pitches in 16 2/3 innings pitched. He had 9 hit by pitches in 3 times the amount of innings the prior season. So I really think that when it came to what went wrong from Sean Manaea, as we're going to talk about more in the next segment, with some examples based on some of the actual games and going through the logs from last season, for me, it was mental mistakes and just a lack of execution. It was some lazy pitches that got rocked, and it turned a season where Manaea was actually statistically under the hood still really good into an absolute disaster. So I want to talk about Manaea more here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business moving forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed sponsored jobs is the move. Because with Indeed, you aren't just going to be hoping the right person stumbles across your post. Instead, Indeed's going to match you with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria like skills, certifications, and location. That's what I like about Indeed. It allows you to get specific and target exactly what you need. And with sponsored jobs, your post gets seen by candidates who are actually a fit. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all the boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show will get $75 in sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 16,000 subscribers by opening day. So as we look back at Sean Manaea's season last year, again, I think mental mistakes are really what killed him. On August 4th, after those 4 outings in July, he had a 2.08 ERA. That 5th outing, you look at what happened, he was rolling. And I think all of the context matters for Manaea if we're trying to explain mental mistakes. And part of that context is post-trade deadline. The New York Mets, or actually, if you look at the 2 games prior to the deadline and then after, the Mets had lost 5 of 6 games. So they're going through a bad stretch. Manaea is supposed to be the stopper. Across the first 5 innings pitched against the Guardians, he gave up just 2 hits. And he hit 1 batter. But he did not issue a walk. He only struck out 2, but he didn't need to strike out batters because he was pounding the zone early and often, and he was getting weak contact. Goes out for the 6th inning in a scoreless game. He gives up a base hit to Steven Kwan. Then he hits a batter. Then he gets a fly out. Gives up a couple of base hits that score a few runs, and nothing was super well struck, but all right, he's getting, dinked a little bit. All right, he can still pitch himself out of it. He's got an 0-1 count on Gabriel Arias. He throws the laziest changeup you're going to see that goes right down the middle and was crushed for a 3-run homer. And again, he was ahead in that count, but it was just a bad pitch. I think a mental mistake. Suddenly a great start turns into a 5-run inning and an absolute disaster. His next time out, he's going up against the Brewers, keeps them off the board through the first 3 innings, picks up 4 strikeouts, 1 walk, 1 hit. So he's rolling. 4th inning, William Contreras ambushes him on the first pitch on a fastball. Now, the pitch theoretically was not too poorly located in the sense that it actually was off the plate, but he came inside of Contreras, and that is a no-no. You see, I can't remember if it was Torrens or Alvarez, but they were set up outside. Instead, he ends up pulling it inside, and boom, right into the wheelhouse for Contreras, and he crushes it. So there is the first run allowed. Again, to me, it looks like a complete just brain fart, just a lack of execution for that pitch. He then gives up a base hit, gets a strikeout, and then gets a would-be double play ball, but the runner beats it out. The Brewers have some speedy guys. I think that was Andrew Monasterio. Now a Red Sox, I believe. Regardless, he then gives up a double on a hanging sweeper right down the middle. That sets up 2 runners in scoring position. He walks the bases loaded, gives up another hit that scores 2, comes back out for 1 batter in the 5th, gives up a single. They pull in for Reed Garrett, and Garrett immediately gives up another home run to William Contreras. And so an inherited run comes across. So again, he's rolling through 3. Disaster. Couple of really bad mistakes. The Mets lose that game, by the way, 7-6 for a team that missed the playoffs by a single game. Those are the ones that kill you. 2 starts later against the Nationals. He strikes out 6 across the first 3 innings pitched, was dialed, gave up 1 double, and that was it through 3 innings. 4th inning, he gives up a 2-out bloop single. He then hits Riley Adams, who was like a 200 hitter at the time, hits him with the pitch when he was ahead in the count. That extends the inning, and then a ground ball base hit scores a run. 5th inning, he gives up a bloop hit, a sac bunt where the Mets could not convert the play and get an out, so both runners are safe. He then hits a batter to load the bases. Then it's a sac fly, walks another batter to load the bases again. Tyler Rogers comes in to try to bail him out of the jam, and he gives up 2 inherited runs. So you just look at those outings, and you could see where a couple things started to get away from him. And it's usually the one blow-up horrible inning that was costing him, but mixed into a lot of these outings was, going through a lineup a full time through and carving, and then he just lost it. You look at, again, some of these under the hood numbers. Expected fielding independent pitching is a statistic that we have that is supposed to eliminate everything else. It's a predictive stat. So if you look at the actual definition, it's an advanced baseball statistic that predicts pitchers' future ERA by replacing their actual home run allowed total with an expected total based on league average home run to fly ball rates. So obviously, as I mentioned, the elevated home run to fly ball rate from Manaea, this stat is going to favor him. It focuses on controllable outcomes like strikeouts, walks, hit by pitches, and fly balls, and measures the true talent for a pitcher, normalizes luck and ballpark factors. You look at his xFIP for last year, So what is ERA we can predict should be moving forward? 3.30. We look at his Sierra, which is another advanced statistic. It evaluates a pitcher's performance by analyzing factors that they can control. So again, strikeouts, walks, ground balls, fly balls, while also accounting for quality of contact. So some say Sierra is an even better predictor for future ERA, than FIP, even xFIP. So you look at Sierra, he had a 3.07 mark there. So all of the advanced stats are telling us that Manaea's stuff last season, what he could control, was better than the actual numbers. Now, I don't think that he was just all bad luck because there was a lack of execution. But I do think there was putting too much pressure on himself based on the contract and what the team needed. And he just got in a bad way. He lost faith in his changeup. He was a two-pitch guy at that point. And he just, ran into a little bit of bad luck, but also, bad luck first, a couple of blue pits, and then just the mistake that kills him, a 3-run homer. So you then look at what the plan is moving forward. How are the Mets going to correct this? There was a great article by Will Salmon in The Athletic that was titled Mets New Pitching Coach on Plans for Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga, and Beyond, where the Mets new pitching coach Justin Willard talked to Will Salmon about a couple of different guys, and one of the main ones was Manaea. Willard apparently flew out to Tampa to meet with Manaea in January, where he watched a bullpen session and then grabbed lunch with him. And what he ended up coming back with is according to Willard, Manaea told him, I want to be challenged. If things are going good or bad, tell me directly. And you also learn in this article that Manaea was working with Tread Athletics. So this is like Driveline. It's another one of these pitching labs. And essentially what they found that went wrong with him last year was he liked the new arm slot a little bit too much and got too extreme with it. So, he wanted to come even more sidearm last year, and maybe that helped them picking up the strikeout number even more, but he lost his changeup and he just was never quite as comfortable. And so now he's closer to where he was in 2024. Manaea says in the article, quote, it's definitely cleaned up and feels a lot better now. With mechanics in order, Manaea's stuff holds a better chance, the article says. Willard described Manaea's fastball as elite, in part because it's a different plane than most pitchers are going to throw from and that batters are used to seeing. And when it comes to his changeup, Manaea says, quote, my changeup, it feels great. It's just trusting to do what I want to do on the mound. I've been burned by it a lot, but you have to trust it. Willard says that he's incredibly confident because of those conversations, as well as the proof being in the pudding. He said that he holds himself to a high standard, and he put in the work this offseason. Another quote from Manaea, he says, well, 2024 was great, 2025 was not great, and that can kind of mess with you a little bit. But that's what we signed up for. Playing the big leagues comes with all sorts of pressure. I'm not going to lie and say I don't think about it at all. I definitely do. For me personally, it was a huge disappointment. For the fan base, everyone else, it was a huge disappointment as well. And they continue to talk about getting better. It says, with that being said, what I went through this offseason, identifying these problems with the work that I put in, I feel like I can accomplish those goals. Now it's just going out there and proving to myself that I can do it, proving it to everyone else, which I know that I can. For me, Sean Manaea is the guy that I'm buying a little bit more stock in than Kodai Senga, because I am not as concerned about the health. I'm not as concerned about some of the volatility that can exist because of the health. And I just believe in the person and the pitcher that we've seen and what his stuff can do in the zone. And I think we're in for a really good season for Manaea. So what I want to talk about next is we're going to get into my Fink projections for both Manaea and Senga. And I also want to talk about what Justin Willard is seeing with Kodai Senga based on this same article. So we're going to go through all of that here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You ever want the chance to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? Well, FanDuel is giving you a chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you're automatically going to be entered in for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right. You're going to get flights, you're going to get tickets, you're going to get the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. I love futures this time of year because you're finally getting some certainty. The trade deadline has passed. we're at this point starting to see what teams are in the NBA, whether you're picking a team to win the championship or to grab a conference title. It's going to add an extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now not only can you cash in on your pick, but it also can send you to the finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started and use your profit boost on an NBA future to get entered in for a chance to win a trip for two to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now it's time to take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club. You're going to get Locked On Mets without the interruptions. You'll get access to our Discord. You can chat to the Mets fans. You'll also get access to a merch shop. If you want to be part of the Everydayer Club, you can find a link in the episode description, or you can go to lockedonmets.supercast.com. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Kodai Senga and what we learned about him in this article. One thing, Senga and Manaea both are working with Tread. So I don't know if that is a little bit of a, I don't know if I want to, what to call it, a partnership between the Mets and Tread, where if they're going to send their guys to one pitching lab, it's Tread. I don't know. But Senga was working with Tread. That's where Willard met with him. And I think they actually said it was New Year's Day in North Carolina. And what Willard first said was, this guy is more of a physical specimen than he realized. And the big talking point as far as Senga is just the fact that Senga needs to be a power pitcher. And that's what they were trying to get back to at Tread, where they were focusing on maximizing his velocity and his general health so that he can be the power pitcher he needs to be, with the fastball, being over 95 miles per hour, paired with that devastating ghost fork. And that's where Senga's at his best. But it really just comes down to health. It's not as much about, we got to fix this part of the mechanics, tweak this, tweak that, change the arsenal. It's just get healthy and be Kodai Senga. And I think they believe he's going to be just fine. And in the article, it says, in the early days of spring training, Willard, manager Carlos Mendoza, and veteran catcher Austin Barnes, who caught a recent bullpen session of Senga's, said all point to how Senga is deploying the fastball with some intensity, calling him intentional with that pitch. So if Kodai Senga is healthy, sky's the limit for what he can be. But as I get into my think projections here, how do I guarantee or predict health for Senga? It's just like David Stern said this offseason. The Mets would be foolish to count on him for 30 starts anymore. You just can't expect that. And the projection models don't really know what to do with them either. The range is between 19 and 25 starts, but 7 of the 9 models all agree on 19 starts for Kodai Senga. You look at the innings pitched, range is 111 to 127 in the third innings pitched. And if you're curious where I'm getting all these numbers, Fangraphs, if you go to their specific player pages, they have all the projection models listed there. So you can look at what the ranges are on these guys before the season. The ERA projection is 3.86 to 4.21. The strikeouts 1.13. 113 strikeouts to 125 strikeouts. All of them are predicting about 1 per 9, maybe a tick below that, which is what he did last year. Strikeout per 9 rate was 8.66. But we saw a couple years ago in 2023, his strikeout per 9 rate was closer to 11. So when I came to my think projections, I'm thinking we see an uptick in the strikeouts if he's going to lean into being that power pitcher. And I think the results when he's on the mound are going to be good. So my projections, I got 20 starts. I got 110 innings pitched. And I have him striking 120 batters in those 110 innings. And for the ERA, I said 3 flat because I don't know what to predict there. If he's at his best, he can pitch to a 1.5 ERA across 13 starts. We saw that last year. If he's wrong, his ERA could be 6. You put it together, it might be a 3 ERA on the season, but over a 20 start span throughout the year, or 20 starts through various spurts throughout the year, I just have no idea where to project that ERA. So the reason why I go with 3, that's his career ERA now. It's exactly 3 flat across his career. So that's where I went. And again, as far as starts, innings pitched, strikeouts, I think we see a little more strikeouts this year, maybe not quite as much as we saw in 2023, where he struck out, I believe, over 200 batters in 160 innings and change there, maybe 165 innings, something around. I think it was 106 in it. My memory is saying 166 and a third. Whether I'm right or wrong, anyone can look that one up. But again, I think the strikeouts tick up, but they're not quite at that level. I think the performance when he's on the mound is good. It's just how much will he get on the mound. When it comes to Sean Manaea, the projection models are very interesting here because every model is projecting bullpen appearances for Manaea. There was some of that for Senga, but nowhere near as drastic, where a lot of these models are predicting 18 to 23 starts, but 32 to 43 appearances. So, as many as 15 to 20 appearances out of the bullpen this year. So kind of expecting a hybrid role. I think part of that is a lot of these models are going to pull from the last 3 years. And you look at Sean Manaea over the last 3 years, he was a swing man in 2023 before coming to the Mets. And then last year, he had 3 appearances out of the bullpen. Now, they were piggyback starts with Clay Holmes, but still, that's why I think the models are projecting him out of the bullpen. I don't expect that to be the case. I think he's going to be exclusively out of the rotation unless they do some of that piggybacking again. 7 of the 8 models have him between 132 and 136 innings pitched. So they have that really locked in and refined. The ERA ranges from 3.82 to 4.51, the strikeouts from 104 to 147. So for me, I'm pretty bullish on Manaea being healthy this year and staying in the zone. So I think he's going to be on the mound. He's going to be throwing strikes, and I think he will pick up his strikeouts. But I do think that Manaea can and will still get burned by the home run ball, and I think there's going to be some peaks and valleys. I think there's going to be some stretches where Sean Manaea is unbelievable, and I think he probably has a month or two where he's less good, and I think we're going to see, very much like we saw in 2024 where he was much better in the second half than the first half. I think we'll see a little bit of that variety throughout this season. So when it comes to the projections, I'm high on innings pitched and starts. I'm high on strikeouts. I am not going to predict that his ERA is where it was in 2024, where it was below 3.5. I think we're going to see something a little bit more than that. But I wanted to note here, the reason why I am so high on the health for Sean Manaea, this is a guy that has been durable throughout his career. He had a shoulder surgery in 2018 that cost him all but 5 starts in 2019. Other than that and the oblique injury this past year, he's been a pretty healthy pitcher. He had 3 full seasons prior to the shoulder injury where he was healthy. Comes off the injury in 2020, he was healthy, and he stayed healthy for 5 years, from 2020 through 2024 until the oblique last year. So when it comes to innings pitched and starts, my projections, I got him making 30 starts, and I got him throwing 165 innings. When it comes to strikeouts, I'm going to predict he's going to get over 200. And so we'll just list it at exactly that, 200 strikeouts. For ERA, I got him at a 3.75. If the Mets got my projections on Senga and Manaea this season, this rotation is going to be very good, because if they get 20 starts out of Senga, and hopefully it's not the same splits of last year of incredible highs and incredible lows, ideally it's more middle ground the whole way through. If they get 20 starts from Senga being generally right with his mechanics, I think you're going to get great results. And if Manaea can be healthy, yes, he is expected to do more based on the contract, where you'd hope that he could be an ace again or a number 2 to Peralta. I don't think the Mets need that. If Sean Manaea even pitches to an ERA over 4, but gives them 160 innings, that's fine. Manaea is right now slated as what? Your number 5 starter, your number 6 starter. It's these 2 guys at the back end of the 6-man rotation. And that's the beautiful luxury of where the Mets are at, because you added Peralta and you have a full season of Nolan McLean coming. You got a 1-2 punch that makes everything easier for the other guys. Where last year, David Peterson and Clay Holmes were the 2 guys that were posting every 5 days, making their starts. They had to carry the rotation. Now that's the middle of your rotation. Kodai Senga and Sean Manaea, guys that were expected to lead the rotation, especially in the second half when the Mets did not trade for a starting pitcher. Those 2 guys were supposed to be the quote-unquote deadline acquisition, the guys that would take off down the stretch. They don't have to carry the rotation. They can be back and arms, so to speak, and they can outperform in those specific roles. So these guys are huge to the Mets this season, but they're not as imperative as they were in years past, especially when you still have in the farm system Jonah Tong, who absolutely will be making some starts this year. You have Jack Wenninger, who certainly could make some starts this year. You have Christian Scott, who I talked about on the One More Thing episode yesterday, who absolutely can make some starts this year. And Tobias Myers can as well. So the depth helps you out when there's kind of coverage for those guys on both sides. There's coverage on the front of the rotation where they don't have to be elite. And there's coverage on the back end where if they're not healthy, it's not going to crater the Mets season, or at least it shouldn't crater the Mets season. I'm more bullish on Manaea just being healthy, but I think stuff-wise, both these guys can still be very good, and I think they really are X factors that raise the ceiling of this team in a pretty considerable way. And I just think that the difference between Manaea and Senga, why I would say I'm higher on Manaea, is I just have a little bit more faith in the floor of him being able to be a dependable start in the rotation that eats innings. And so that's the difference the way I see it. Anyway, that's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. Tomorrow's show, we'll see if there's any other news items that come out of camp. If not, we're going to continue our projection series here, as I'll be going through every notable contributor on the Mets prior to opening day, giving my own projections or predictions, really, on what these guys are going to do with their stats this season, and looking forward to how they will impact the Mets in the upcoming year. As always, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network.